안녕하세요. UK톡스 웨비나 시리즈의 6번째 세션에 참석해 주셔서 감사합니다. 저는 주한영국문화원 교육사회실 소속 엄선현입니다. 팬데믹으로 인해 유학을 준비하던 분들의 학업 계획에 많은 변수가 생겼죠. 하지만 양질의 교육에 대한 열정은 좀처럼 꺼지지 않습니다. 여전히 미래에 대한 다양한 선택지를 원하는 분들을 위해 영국 유학, 그리고 진로를 주제로 총 10개의 웨비나를 준비하였습니다. 400명이 넘는 분들이 신청해 주신 만큼 유익한 시간이 되기를 바라며 6번째 세션 시작하겠습니다. 이번 세션에서는 주한영국문화원 성인어학원의 강남센터 아카데믹 매니저이신 마이클 그린 선생님께서 영국과 한국의 대학 생활은 어떻게 다른지, 나에게 맞는 영국대학은 어떻게 선택해야 하는지, 그리고 한국 학생들이 영국 대학에서 잘 적응하기 위해서는 어떤 준비가 필요한지 말씀해 주시겠습니다. 시작에 앞서 간단한 당부 말씀드릴게요. 본 웨비나는 영어로 50분간 진행될 예정이고요. 궁금한 점이 있다면 언제든지 채팅방에 질문을 해주세요. 마이클 선생님께서 발표 후에 간단한 질의응답 시간을 가질 예정입니다. 컴퓨터로 접속하신 분들은 우측에서 채팅창을 확인하실 수 있고 모바일 기기로 접속하신 경우에는 상단의 물음표 아이콘을 누르시면 채팅창이 나옵니다. 채팅창에서 공감 가는 질문이나 마음에 드는 답변이 있다면 좋아요 버튼을 눌러주세요. 프로듀서님, 저희 음소거 처리해야 될 것 같아요. 네, 웨비나 종료 전 랜덤으로 한 분께 약소하지만 저희가 마음을 담아 준비한 선물을 드릴 예정이니 끝까지 자리를 지켜주시면 감사하겠습니다. 그럼 지금부터 시작하겠습니다. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for waiting for our opening in Korean. Now we're ready to hear your presentation. So I'm going to introduce you officially. Everyone, I'm honored to introduce our favorite speaker, Michael Green, the Academic Manager at the British Council English Teaching Center for Adults at Gangnam. Michael? Michael, could you unmute yourself?
Thanks for the nice introduction. This is Michael. So I'm just going to tell you what we'll be talking about today. So the main topic for this section is how is university life different between Korea and the UK? So you can see the flag, and we also have King Sejong, who was the first person I met when I came to Korea. Next slide, please. So after the introduction, I'll be talking about life on campus, which is about really which academic skills do you need to survive in the UK. After this, we'll move off campus, which I've called life. So this is about what to expect outside of the university. This is really important. And then the third session, which university is right for me? So if you're currently searching for university, I'm going to try and break it down and show you the different types of universities available in the UK. So really this one is about where can you find the best experience academically, socially, and culturally. And then finally, we'll have the live Q&A session. So this is where you'll have some chance to ask me some questions. I'll try to answer as many useful questions as I can. And if I don't know the answer, then I'll try to direct you to the best resources so you can find the answer easily. Okay, next slide, please. So before I move on to the sections, I just want to give a little bit of background. So, I really like movies, so I've based this presentation on true stories from Gangnam Adult Center. So the background is obviously lots of people talk to me, I listen to people, I help people, mostly in the Gangnam Adult Center. In some cases, these are just university students, sometimes teachers and lecturers and other university professionals. So for me, personally, I really like stories. I like listening to people's stories. So if you want the kind of lists and data, there's lots of websites for that. But my session today is really about the stories that people have told me and how I can help them. So obviously this year's been very difficult and many people couldn't get to the UK to study. So we changed the way we did our courses in Gangnam. We do something called a needs analysis, which is where we find out what kind of things people need for their course. Sometimes it's just grammar, sometimes it's speaking practice. This year was slightly different because many people wanted kind of cultural needs. They couldn't get to the UK, so we tried to offer them something a little bit different. This was the beginning of what we called the Super Summer Intensive. This was in Gangnam, British Council. So this was basically a full immersion course with a cultural component and lots of tea drinking as well. So basically, real problems faced by real students that we tried to help them with. Okay, next slide, please. So like I said, the first section is talking about on-campus life or academic life. And one of them is, as you can see, independent study. So this is a really, really important part of studying in the UK. The second section will be looking at critical thinking. The third section will be looking at teamwork. And then finally will be my favorite, which is the extensive reading. Okay, so I've broken it down into 4 sections. I'm just going to talk a little bit about each one and why I think it's so important. So like I said, the first one, independent study. This is about working alone for assignments, revision, and finding your own study path. So really, it's actually about time management. In the UK, the equivalent of high school, which we would call sixth form or year 12, year 13, part of your timetable is actually just private study time. So you don't have to go to your lessons. It's about finding the best way to study and what to do with your time. So I think this is very different from the experience in Korea where you kind of have a full timetable, sometimes till quite late into the evening. So my experience in the Gangnam Center is actually adding extra skills sessions to deal with what we call learner training. So again, about motivation, time management, and study skills. This can be a huge priority. So it's quite difficult to face an empty timetable and decide, what do I need to do? When do I need to do it? So I think even if you studied to pass exams in Korea, this might be quite different or difficult. I think the takeaway from this is something I often say to students in Gangnam. Being taught is different than learning. It's a more active process, which brings me on to the second part, the critical thinking. So memorizing facts and figures is really common to pass tests in Korea and lots of other countries. Some of the academic subjects in the UK, this is also quite common. For me personally, I actually really like memorizing facts. For example, Dover is the state capital of Delaware. I only know that because I enjoy learning facts. But this isn't enough to get through the tertiary education, which is education after high school. So I think one of the most important things with critical thinking, it's about reflecting on your learning, reflecting carefully and critically analyzing content. To give you an example of this would be, so if you're writing an essay, you can just write your opinion, but actually, if you look at both sides of a debate, you're actually more likely to get a higher score. And if you're taking an IELTS test, this is probably the same. So the IELTS Part 2 writing, you would probably get higher score for just talking about both sides of the argument. Okay, so I think, yeah, this is a skill that is evaluated very, very carefully in the UK universities. This is especially true when you're doing like a literature review in academic writing. Third part, we're looking at teamwork. So as I mentioned earlier, the independent study is central to most courses, but these days there's an increasing amount of collaborative work. So, project presentations, and some of the research is conducted in pairs or small groups. So it's quite common to find group projects which make up parts of your assessment and your scores. This isn't always optional. It can be mandatory as part of your course. So there's an expectation where you would have to work with other people. What's the reason for this, you might ask? Well, the reason is this is partly to help you when you join the workforce. So it's preparation really for the world of work. To give a couple of strange examples, very strange examples. So even if you have interviews in some places, especially more creative jobs, some employers actually have, I've heard this called the pub test. So it's actually you go and have a drink with other people who are taking an interview. And what the employer is looking for is, can you tell stories? Can you tell jokes? Do you get along well with people? Another test I've heard about is what some employers call a train test, which is, can you spend a long period of time with someone? So, can you get along with someone for longer periods of time? Because this is essential for lots of jobs. So this is generally, it's known as EQ instead of IQ. This is a measure of emotional intelligence. So it's, I think the takeaway here is collaboration can be actually more valuable than competition. So working with people is super important. Okay, we'll move on to the fourth one, which is extensive reading. So if someone said to me, especially in the UK, I've never heard of William Shakespeare, I've never heard of Charles Dickens, because my major is business administration. So this is quite frightening, quite scary, because even if you have to read for your field of study, you also need to read a wide range of publications, I think. So not just your compulsory reading list. There's a kind of life reading list. So, books that are just important culturally. So I think it's really important when you're studying in the UK to find time to do this. So to go outside your reading list and field of study. A good way to do this is by asking friends or classmates to be study buddies, or actually to set targets for which books you want to read in university. Discussing like extended reading and some of the books you like is very motivating when you're studying. And these days you can also find really useful websites which actually track your reading, and you can make a kind of study lists as well. So the takeaway from this final section is read deeply for your own area, but try to read widely for fun. Okay, I think we'll move on to the next slide. So we've been on campus, we've been in a lecture, you're doing well academically, but this isn't 100% of your time. So I'm just going to have a look at the differences between Korea and the UK, kind of outside of the universities during everyday life. So the first area of the four is what I've called regions. So it's regional identity. The second part, we're going to move on to kind of culture. The third will be food and drink. And then finally, a very, very large area, life experience with the globe. Okay, so, the UK, I think red buses, Big Ben, black taxis, there's lots of these images which come from movies and books. Most of them kind of focus on London. But something to remember, especially with universities, is the UK is very regional. This can be really important and sometimes even controversial. So many people in the UK they're quite relaxed about nationalism and patriotism compared to other countries. However, people are also sensitive about their identity. This is especially true these days with, we have referendums, we're just about to go through the final parts of Brexit and Europe. There's also what we call devolution, which is other nations seeking full independence from the UK. So I think the best way to think about regional identity when you're dealing with people outside of the campus is, I think it's got different layers. So it's not just like, I'm from the UK, that's it. There's 4 countries in the UK. In the case of England, where I'm from, there's also a north-south divide. There's class differences, religious differences, ethnic differences, and another huge difference, which I'm sure you'll hear, is the differences in accents. There are so many accents in the UK, so I think it's a really good idea. If you're going to study in the UK, we say tune your ear. So try to tune your ear to different kinds of accents. The best way to do this, which we do in our adult centres all the time, is using different TV shows or podcasts. I think, there's so many different accents. It can be quite hard if you're just used to listening to kind of like American English or kind of a standard British English. However, I do believe that people are very tolerant, and if you can make a good cup of tea, if you don't call football soccer, then you'll probably be fine. Sure, it's not going to be a problem. So I think the takeaway for the identity section is try and take a cue from people around you, kind of copy what other people are doing when they're labeling people or asking sensitive questions. And please remember that the UK is very diverse. There are many ways to be British or many ways to be from the UK. Okay, I'm going to move on to culture next. So this is the football picture. So a little bit like the Shakespeare in the reading, even if you don't like football, if you hate football, if you don't like Shakespeare, it's still really hard to escape these kind of central cultural ideas. So I think if you're going for a more advanced level of English, you're aiming for a higher band score on IELTS, it's really useful to be able to talk about different topics. And I think having a basic knowledge of different topics, I think it's just going to lead to just a more enjoyable life off campus. Something I often talk about, because I'm a big football fan, is the fan culture of football and sports is quite different. So people have usually huge amounts of loyalty to their football clubs. I often think someone's football club in the UK is almost like their country. And these days as well, women's football is also growing very rapidly as well. So don't be surprised to meet women who can talk tactics much better than Jose Mourinho. So something to wrap up this section, I think university life is not just academic, it's a way to join clubs, join societies. Most institutions, they're looking for 3-dimensional individuals, people who don't just study, but have an active cultural life. So, visiting more places, meeting more people is a really good idea. Takeaway from this section is having broad cultural experiences is becoming increasingly important. Okay, I'm going to move on to the food and drink section. This won't take too long. It's just something that people often think about before they go to the UK. There's still a stereotype that British food is bad, but I don't think this is the case anymore. So historically, industrialization, urbanization changed food culture, probably for the worse. There was also rationing during the war, which is about 10 years where people didn't have access to the food they used to enjoy. However, there's been a massive growth in people rediscovering local food. There are lots of world famous chefs from the UK, and so many hours, days, even weeks dedicated to cooking, or these days baking, on UK TV. So I think the most successful international students that I've met in my job have been people who've really, they found a balance between eating food from home and just discovering local places to eat, which, it can be expensive, but I think if you go to pubs, they're probably the best places to find good local food. And in general, produce can be quite cheap as well compared to Korea. So I think meat is much cheaper in the UK. So I think, takeaway is it's more rewarding to try new foods, I think. And a language note here, it's takeaway food. So not takeout like the US, or delivery foods like career, its takeaway. Okay, and then the final section for off-campus is life experience. So this is really a general idea from all of the others. So many people actually send their kids away to university for them to become adults. Like I said, it is changing, but I think in the past, people were kind of expected to rent a house, pay bills, and discover themselves. It's changing because these days, I think the standard of accommodation is increased dramatically in most universities. There's a lot more student accommodation compared to renting houses in most towns in the UK. I think this experience is probably quite similar in the US as well. So people often go to universities which are quite far from their hometown to give that, we call it character building. So to give a longer experience. So it's not just getting a degree. So I think in general, the off-campus life is where you have the chance to build lifelong connections, even start businesses, get involved in charities or politics. So again, this takeaway is for the whole of this section, the off-campus life, which is your main motivation when you're studying. It might be academic, but I think if you have a successful campus life, this might change. Things can change. Okay, I think we'll go on to the next section. So can I have the next slide, please? So this section is, I'm calling which university is right for me. So I've tried to break this down, but luckily the UK kind of does it for me. So we generally divide our universities into 4 main sections. So the first picture you can see on the left is our kind of ancient universities. The second one is what I call red brick university. So ancient, red brick, and the third one, if you can see, is plate glass. So this is a bit more modern universities, sort of 1960s. And then the final picture we just call new universities. I've put new in inverted commas because it's, some of them are not that new. We're talking maybe 30 years now, so younger than me. Okay, so like I said, the first one, the oldest universities don't really need any introduction. So if you've heard of Oxford and Cambridge, we sometimes just call it Oxbridge. So Oxbridge, a combination of Oxford and Cambridge. So I guess you could say this is the Sky of the UK, or perhaps the Ivy League. So ancient universities include Oxford and Cambridge, but also quite a few other smaller cities. Apart from, I think Glasgow is the only sort of large city which has what's considered an ancient university. So, how do you know if this is the right place for you? Well, the ancient universities are kind of the more typical university towns. So they take up a really large area and culture of the town. And some of the other ancient universities were formed before the 16th century. So yeah, very old towns. You probably see people wandering around with their college colours, lots of bikes as well. If you go to Oxford or Cambridge, you'll still see lots of people getting around by bicycle. So these universities have the highest prestige, which means, if you get offered a place in one of these from high school, you're very likely to accept it. However, compared to some countries, the UK doesn't just look at university degree. So I think it's still a good idea to have a well-balanced education and cultural background if you're looking for jobs in different sections. So many employers, they're looking for skills and personality and not just the degree. So I think takeaway from ancient universities, you don't need to research these too much because it would be they're already famous, and if you get a place in one of these, I think it's going to work out well for you. The second picture, so red brick universities. The picture shows red brick. It just means they're a bit older, so generally 19th century. These were founded during the Industrial Revolution. So I think originally there were about 6, and most of them got university status before about 1918, before the First World War. So the reason for these universities was generally for engineering or science-related subjects. These days, if you want to specialize in technology, science, design, engineering, then these are really great universities for these subjects. So I think the reason for those subjects was at the time of the founding, this was happening in the UK, in Britain and across the British Empire. There was a need for people to specialize in those areas. These days, they're still in high demand as well. So I think that's the academic side. But if you want to go to this type of university, the thing that I would, make you remember is they're in large industrial and manufacturing cities. So we're talking about, big cities, big football teams, big nightlife, kind of regional capitals, really, like Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle. So if you're someone who kind of wants to stay on campus and hide in the library, it's probably not the best place for you to go. So I think just again, research your subject carefully, but also remember to research the city or the town as well. Third picture is the plate glass. So these are what we'd call more modern universities. When I say modern, I mean sort of 1960s. So these by UK standards are quite modern. The buildings look modern. They're made from concrete and glass, hence the name plate glass. So sometimes these places are named after larger areas or kind of counties or regions instead of cities. And many of these have gained status and they make the top university lists these days, even though they're newer. And most of these were created after that there was a government report, which just, we just didn't have enough universities in the UK around the 1960s. So I think historically it was getting much easier to access higher education. And in some cases it was free as well. So this was the reason for the plate glass universities. I think in some cases, these are almost the opposite to red brick because some of these are campus based and they're in smaller towns as well, or they're outside the town. So, if you're comfortable in that situation, then a plate glass university would be quite useful. More of a quiet campus based experience. The last picture, new universities. These were often called Polytechnics, which is more like your training for jobs. So these mostly began in 1992. And in the past, they taught more what I'd say vocational courses instead of academic. And this is still the case for many of these universities. So these are often places where you can study teaching, visual arts, media studies, journalism. The pattern continues. It's getting you ready for the world of work rather than studying to kind of learning how to learn. So some of these places have very specific industry-based courses rather than those academic courses. So I think if you're looking for if you're looking for a degree for a very specific industry, then these are probably quite useful, these type of universities. Very practical courses and trying to get you into industry. So takeaway, I think, from all of these, once again, is, do the research on the subject, but also really, really research the place where you want to go, research the city as well. Okay, I think we'll move on to the next part now, the next slide. So this is a chance to go through any questions you want to ask. So a quick summary of what I talked about. So I talked about life on campus, which was about academic skills. The off-campus life was a bit more about the culture and perhaps the town where you're studying, how to get the most. And which university is right for me was about getting the best experience and fitting the correct university to your experience as well.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
It really helped me to get the general understanding about UK University. So I hope the attendees do the same. And let's move to the Q&A session. So please type your questions in the Q&A box. and give a thumbs up if you find the answer useful. So I'm going to pick some interesting questions from the Q&A box. Okay, Michael, I'm going to give you the first question.
Okay.
I already scored good enough in IELTS to get into UK university. However, I'm not yet confident in writing an essay. Do you have some tips on how I can improve my writing skills before starting university in the UK? So what do you say?
That's a big question to start. It's actually, I'm glad you chose that one. It's really, really common. So last summer, I had lots of people came into the Gangnam Center who, they're basically advanced speakers, but they're not advanced in the sense of, the academic culture. So yeah, they still weren't sure about how to go about writing an essay, organizing answers. I think, in this case, even if you've got a high level, it's worth spending more time to try and get used to the academic culture. So I guess these days you can take this online IELTS classes are quite good because you can fit that to your own timetable. It's become a legacy of this year, the COVID year. So you can actually take the IELTS unit, specifically writing, if you want to. You can take them online. Most of them are offered online now with British Council. You can join the course, like an intensive course is quite useful for those kind of people as well. So I think what they're looking for is that full immersion. That they can already speak, but they need to think about different areas. So something I often say to people is, okay, you've got advanced English, but could you work in a pub or like a phone shop? Can you have a general conversation with the normal kind of members of the public and not just university lecturers? And something else that might help the person asking this question, I'd say most of the universities I know, they actually offer the pre-sessional courses. So they're specifically designed, they're usually a few weeks before the main course starts. So the campus will be more or less empty, and it's generally just international students. And it's you learn how to write essays and how to deal with some of the skills I mentioned. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. I'm sure there's, even if you've got a high IELTS score, there's always things you can do to improve. Okay, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, it was very helpful. Thank you so much, Michael. Actually, we got a question from one of your students from Jamsil. So yeah, she's currently studying in her master's degree in Korea. And I will just read her question. Could you tell me the way that I can do as a preparation to study doctoral degree directly in the UK after my studying? I'm just wondering that should I study my master's degree again after go to the UK, even though I finished that in Korea?
So it's someone they finished their master's and they're looking to do doctoral.
Yeah, I think she's currently studying the master's degree in Korea, and what she means after she finished this course, she want to go to the UK for a doctoral degree. Yeah. And she's asking if she needs to do master's degree in the UK to follow up,
I
before
think, this one, it depends on the institution. So it's very much case by case. So if you want to pursue, if you're pursuing a serious, academic field, some of the really good institutions in the UK, you'd have to check what they accept. So which university masters they accept. So it depends where the student's done the masters and if it's accepted in the UK. But it would be on the website for any institution. They would outline which master's courses would be accepted. However, I'd still recommend if it was full-time study. So I think if you're prepared to sacrifice a year or 2 years full-time study of doing a master's in the UK, that would be quite a good thing to do. It would make the doctorate work, I think, much more accessible. if you've studied the MA in the UK. I
All
hope
right.
that helps. Yeah, I'm sorry. It sounds like it's just a sort of a case by case. So I would need to know if they can email me specifically which subject, and I can give them some more help, I think, with that one.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think the student find the answer useful. And we have a few questions about master degree again. So I'm going to give you this question. Do you think a lot of students fail to finish master degree in the UK? Or is it relatively easy if you work hard enough? And I think this means, when usually we compare the master degree or doctoral degree between the UK and the US, because US has longer period, but UK offers shorter period, which can be advantage, but it could also bring you the pressure about, we need to finish this academic course, deep in-depth academic course within a shorter period. So I think that's what she's asking.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even the undergraduate degrees. So on average, most of the UK degrees are actually 3 years, and in the US and Korea, mostly are 4 years. So whether you do more in that time, I don't know. But yeah, it's I think this goes back to the first part when I talked about the academic life. So I think the most important thing is that independent study and becoming an autonomous learner. So you need to find a way to organize your own time and also stay motivated. So these days, the kind of blended learning, which is a mixture of online and face-to-face, they're quite common, and lots of self-access courses. One of the problems with those is it's your self-motivation. But I think it depends on the individual. So I would recommend trying to make some kind of a study group. That's quite common. And you're talking about sometimes modules which you can take at different times. Some courses are super flexible. I know of a course, there's a kind of a language teaching course, MA, which is like 6 years. So you can take different modules within 6 years. So what happens is if you're given so much time, it's actually, you don't have the pressure of the deadline, which I think people need when you're completing an MA. But yeah, in answer to your question, I'm sure there's a statistic online. I think, many people don't finish MAs, many people don't finish degrees, but it depends on the reason, what's the reason for not completing? And if the reason is that you found really good employment, then it might not be so important. But I think culturally, I think it's better for institutions to allow people a bit more time if they're working, if it's a part-time MA. Yeah.
I understand. And actually, your answer motivated me. Yeah. So, okay, I need to do that. And my next question is also about the master degree, but I think this can cover the undergraduate course as well.
Yep.
So the student want to know about which element should they take into account when they deciding the university they should go to. For example, in condition, the university has similar curriculum and offers similar curriculum for similar major course. So if so, then what else they should take into account?
So it's someone who's perhaps they've looked at like 2 very similar institutions.
I guess so.
Very similar course. This happened to me because I was looking for when I was going into linguistics for an MA. I just did the wisest thing I could think of, which is ask people who finished. So ask graduates of that course, and then you can usually get an idea as to which is the most useful course. But yeah, if you get any way of speaking to anyone who's completed the course, that's the best way to do it, depending on if the course has changed a lot. So for example, I would never give advice on the degree I studied because it was too long ago. So I think all the teachers would have changed, the topics would have changed. But if someone was asking me like about a linguistics MA, I could give them, very, very up-to-date advice, because I know of about probably 10 to 15 teachers, some of whom work in the British Council, who've completed courses, and there's a kind of momentum. So someone will do a course, they'll complete a master's, and then they'll recommend it to somebody else. So yeah, I definitely go by word of mouth on that one. So even if they look identical, then word of mouth would be the most helpful. Otherwise, it will just go back to my off-campus life and just have a look at the actual city. So which city is most appealing, or even which place has cheaper accommodation is actually that could be something as well if you're staying in that city.
Yeah, I totally agree. So yeah, beside the academic factors, we could consider the culture environment very importantly.
Yeah.
All right. So our next question is about the English exams. So the attendee say how well my English should be if I want to study in the UK university. What kind of English proficiency test should I study for?
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
I think for UK universities, the most recognised is definitely IELTS. There's a few Cambridge exams as well, but I'd say mostly, to get visas and to get onto university courses, you'd probably need an IELTS band score. Usually, I don't know, around 6.5 for most good universities. So even if you're not taking an IELTS test, and you've got a plan to go in another year, it's worth practicing. It's worth trying to find some IELTS resources. You can study a lot of IELTS individually. So, even if you don't sign up for like the online IELTS course, you can go onto YouTube these days and try and find the band score you're looking for, and you can practice that way. But yeah, the IELTS test is one of the most kind of widely used courses in the UK.
Okay, thank you. Another attendee asked you about, would you recommend any websites where I can take various lectures in English? So I think, you could provide some references for the attendee they can take into.
There's some of them coming up, although they're quite fun. They're more like fun lectures. In the UK around Christmas time, they have these lunchtime lectures which they broadcast on, I think it's on BBC.
Oh.
So yeah, they're quite common over the Christmas period.
Wow.
And then of course you've got the kind of like things like TED Talks as well, which they're not really lectures though, they're just short talks. And then in terms of webinars, I think there's a few websites like, if I can give an example, I'm sure I can give an example for this one. I think FutureLearn they've got lots of different categories on FutureLearn.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the British Council has some content on FutureLearn, so you can just find the topic you're doing. That'll have some access to free lectures, and I think most of the courses are free, but you don't get like a certificate.
Exactly.
So if you subscribe, you get a certificate, and you'll get some kind of, there'll be like sort of credits for it. And then other places to look would be, I think it's changing so much because of the COVID situation.
Mm-hmm, right.
So I know that we, as the British Council Adult Centres, have recently started doing kind of lectures, academic style lectures, just because it's if you're going to be stuck at home with a computer, then you may as well get the most out of that situation. So yeah, that happens as well. But yeah, I don't know of any like one specific website with everything. I would go find the subject first and then maybe match the subject to the best university.
I think it's still very helpful because I found the lunchtime English from BBC. That sounds very interesting. So I might Google it later. All right, and as we are running out of time, I'm going to give you the last question.
Ooh, is this the big one?
Oh yeah. All right. Okay. I want to ask you this one. This is for the master or doctoral degree courses. As you know, they need to do some research, so there should be many criteria to consider. And between the lecture themselves or the university's facility for research. So which one do you find or do you recommend more importantly?
That's an
Question.
interesting question. Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say generally one follows the other. So it's very unlikely that you'll have a really kind of someone who's like a master in their field and not be at the correct institution. So you know, they'll generally be at the institution which is famous for that particular field of study. There's one thing to look at probably in the case of the UK. I didn't mention this in my presentation, but we have the Russell Group of universities. So these are specific like research universities. They club together. They have an organization which relates to the government. They also advise even like high schools on which A levels are useful. They advise on the content of curriculum, and really these specific research fields are very important. So they get the funding from, in some cases, from the government. So yeah, if you were looking at like serious research universities, if you want your research to be kind of published and really high level, then it's worth looking at the Russell Group. So I think there's around 20 universities in that particular group.
Yeah.
The other one, I'll tell you, this is a bit of a strange recommendation, but if you look online bookshop or actually just a normal bookshop, look at your field. So whichever field you're studying, and look at the publishers. So for example, for me, most of the books I buy are about language teaching, linguistics and language teaching. So a lot of it is really Cambridge publications. And they do the exam for teachers. Our teachers in British Council often take this course called a CELTA, which is a Cambridge course. So yeah, some universities they're very strong on particular fields. So you'll see the university publication on the kind of books you're looking for. So I think that's quite a good indication as to if that's the right university for your field.
All right. Thank you so much.
That was a very difficult question.
I think it helps. Yeah. I'm not the person who asked the question, but I think, yeah. So I appreciate you, Michael, for delivering such an informative session today.
You're welcome. I hope it was useful to everybody.
Yes. So dear attendees, if you find Michael's session useful, please leave a thank you message in the Q&A chat box. And we're going to do another webinar series for the postgraduate level in March next year. I think many of you would be interested in that. So please make sure to follow us on KakaoTalk, 주한영국문화원 Study UK, so that we can keep you posted. And if you have any inquiries for British Council Teaching Center, please search 주한영국문화원 어학원 on KakaoTalk. Our team has randomly picked a person for our present. So attendees, please check your question box to see if you won. My colleague has replied to the winner's comment directly and provided the information to follow up. So everyone, thank you so much for joining for our 6th session today. The 7th session will start in 10 minutes. If you're interested in working in global organization or company, you must take it. So once again, thank you all for joining today, including Michael. Stay tuned for upcoming events and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.